focusing on a single metric and just trying to grow that week over week. Like that is how a startup becomes successful. Right. When I'm talking to other startup founders, it's always, I need to do this, I need to do that. We need to do, I don't know, like all these different things. And the idea is, how do you simplify your business down to just a single metric?
Hi, my name is Ronan Kennedy and I'm a career coach and podcast host. I'm interviewing people from various different careers, industries and backgrounds to find out what they do, how they got into it, and what they like or dislike about their roles. So whether you're a seasoned professional looking for some inspiration, or whether you're a new grad looking for some ideas and options, this podcast has something for you. So join us every week as we delve into the world of work, share personal and professional development tips, and uncover the secrets to a fulfilling career. Today I'm joined with my buddy Tim Jones, who's very kindly come over to chat to us about his career so far. Tim, thanks for popping in.
Thank you for having me, Ronan. Yeah. Amazing apartment, amazing views. Glad to finally be on the hot seat here.
Yeah, exactly. So, so tons of questions to ask you after reading about you on LinkedIn a little bit today.
Yeah, always like some good internet stalking. Appreciate that.
So can you tell us, can you give us maybe a little rundown of your career so far?
Sure. Okay. So I went to the University of Michigan, go Blue, graduated in 2013, studied computer science. While I was in college, I had a couple internships, one at Boeing in the Seattle area, one in Silicon Valley with Microsoft, very cool. Both in software engineering. When I was a freshman in university, I think the dream was I lived in Seattle a couple years growing up. Always thought that the dream was to go back there, maybe work at Microsoft as an engineer. That was always the goal. Turns out I got an offer from Microsoft after the internship and decided that wasn't for me. I was more into the entrepreneurship, smaller startup path at that point. So got the offer from Microsoft, turned that down, eventually accepted an offer from Yelp in San Francisco. I accepted that beginning of my senior year at Michigan in September, and always thought that I was going to start there the following August. And 2 weeks before the start date, I called my contact there and quit before I even started.
You quit before you started. Okay.
Exactly, because my goal was really to go back into the startup world and be a founder. And while I was interning in Silicon Valley in 2012, I started a company with one of my friends. I recruited my other friend who I was living with out there to join as well. And that ended up being what I quit my job to pursue.
Wow. Can I ask you, so you made a lot of changes and big decisions right from the get-go.
Yeah, that was 2013. That was a decade ago.
Wow,
yeah.
That's crazy. What was it like working with Boeing and Microsoft, two huge companies?
Yeah.
That'd be a lot of people's dream, especially coming out of college, right?
Yeah, I mean, Boeing, it was after my sophomore year, my second year in university. And it was a great place to be at that point in my career for sure. The work itself, I was in IT. So interesting, I think, to see the inside of a company like that, but not the sort of job that I want to have long term. Was it
because it was more corporate, slower structure, or was it you just weren't very excited about the work
itself?
So
I think when IT, here in Europe, I think is sort of encompasses the idea of software engineering. In the US, when we say IT, it's like fixing your laptops or like internal infrastructure, I guess. And that's not the exciting thing as a software engineer. Being at Boeing was a really neat experience. The internship program was great. The people I met were great. We got to go into the warehouses where the doors are big enough to fit a 747 through them.
Very cool.
Got to tour the planes and see the 787 while it was still being developed before all the current chaos of Boeing. It was, had a good reputation back then.
Yep.
So it was a good experience. And Microsoft also, they really wine and dine their interns. It's really sort of a pipeline to recruit full-time talent. So they flew us out from Silicon Valley to Seattle. They had a private concert with big name artists. They gave everyone a new laptop.
Okay, they're really trying to show you a good time.
Yeah, exactly.
Build that loyalty from the start.
It's high paying. It was interesting. I mean, the big company vibe, I don't think was for me, but it was definitely an amazing internship.
So, getting into both of those companies from a young age, obviously you're super smart, you're super hardworking, or you're just amazing in applications.
Yeah, it could be both.
But
no, it is both, honestly.
What did you find? Did you were you getting good grades in college? Were you super hard worker, or what do you find? And well, obviously parts of those, but what do you find really made the difference in terms of getting into those big companies?
So I think one thing I would have done more is focus more on side projects than on grades. I've always been, grades motivated. I did get really good grades, and that got me the interviews. I can talk about the interview process next. But I also had friends. I had a friend who failed chemistry at the chemistry lab, and eventually he got C's. His GPA wasn't very good, and he got a job at Apple. And because he was working on a project on his own, he's able to talk about that in interviews. They can see that he can do amazing work. They don't care what kind of grades you get in some sort of theory class or in math necessarily. They care about what you can actually do and your passion and your ability to learn new things.
Wow. So I guess you're showing initiative, you're showing innovation, you're showing project management. Is that like you're putting a project on GitHub, or you're developing an app or a website, or yes to all, or yes to any?
Yeah, I mean, it could be all of it. I think mostly it's building some sort of app. Right. I think college kids have time, and they all have ideas, and you're surrounded by so many smart people that you can work with. And so, especially now, I think a decade later, or even a few years later after I left, that became more of a common thing, a commonplace. There's hackathons all the time. There's this real culture around building things, and startups and all that kind of stuff is in the news. There's plenty of examples of people raising millions of dollars as a 19-year-old. It's sort of the sexy thing to do.
Yeah. That's we hear this from the States all the time, especially San Francisco. Did you find that was different to Michigan, or was that sort of atmosphere embedded in Michigan as well?
At University of Michigan, there is the computer science department is huge. Like Microsoft, at Microsoft, Michigan had the most interns at Microsoft. A lot of my friends from there go and get great jobs in Silicon Valley. So the culture there, in terms of that tech culture, startup culture, is actually really strong.
Did you start building a side project in college as well?
At that point, when I got the Microsoft internship, no. Okay. I did build this company that I launched that I founded was just before my senior year at Michigan. So for that one, yes, but it was only until after I had that Microsoft job.
Right. Okay. So what was that company?
So that company was called CribSpot. At first, it was called A2 Cribs. Okay. And it was solving the problem of finding off-campus housing at Michigan. So in the US, not sure exactly here. I know it varies across different countries, different cities, but everyone lives off campus usually after your freshman year, maybe after your sophomore year in college. And so Ann Arbor, it's a town of probably 100,000 people with 40,000 students.
Oh, wow.
20,000 of them, 25,000 of them or more are living off campus. And there are all these houses. It could be small apartments. It could be 6, 8, 10 bedroom houses. And finding housing was always a stressful experience. Usually you'd have to sign a lease for the next year for the best properties, at least by October, early November of the prior year. So you have to find all your friends, figure out who you're going to live with, and pay deposit and sign really far in advance. Right. The best properties you could only really find through your friends or just by walking around campus. Honestly, that's what we did. They have signs in the front. You can see who the property management company is. Right. You call them. They probably have their own website most of the time, but you have to kind of find it. Back then, there wasn't really a great online resource.
So it's all really piecemeal. It's all kind of patched together as opposed to just this one solution.
And now I feel like there's good solutions for this, but back then that was a real problem. Yeah. And it wasn't just us, it was everyone. Everyone kind of agreed that this was a problem. And so our goal was to get all of those listings and put them into one spot. And so we had a manual process by which we scraped all these listings, and that's exactly what we built. So we built this map interface. I think now it's sort of every website has this map interface with dots on it. Back then it was somewhat, new and exciting.
You have to do it from scratch, right?
Exactly.
A lot more. Now it's just a plug-in or something.
And now it's easy, but so we're building that just before my senior year. We launched it in November. It was really cool. We got in the Ann Arbor newspaper, the student newspaper, and seeing people at the library using your website was really cool. So we launched that my senior year at Michigan.
Very cool. And did you get some good feedback from the students? And
we did. Yeah. I mean, people loved it. Yeah. It was really helpful. I mean, like I said, it was a real problem, and other people thought it was a problem. So we launched that in November. My second semester, I only had, I think, like 1.5 classes. I'd already hit all my credits. And so basically that was somewhat of a full-time job.
That was your full-time job.
40 hours.
How did you differentiate it from Craigslist? We don't really use Craigslist in Europe so much, but...
Yeah. So partially was inventory. So they don't, a website for finding housing is only as good as the inventory that's on it.
Ah, right.
So Craigslist didn't have all the inventory. Everyone else kind of knows that Craigslist has a lot of the issues with spam and low quality listings. But I would say that was quality, and just having all the inventory was really the biggest value proposition for us.
Okay, so you kind of followed an Airbnb, similar sort of quality listings. Apparently they did very well because they had very nice photos, and that attracted a lot of people to the site. So where'd you go with that? Did you keep that going, or did you pivot to something else? Or
so at that point we evolved from A2 Cribs, which is very Ann Arbor specific, to Crib Spot, and we launched with sublets at first, just based on the timing of the year. At that point we got an interview with Techstars, which isn't Y Combinator. It's another really well-known startup accelerator, and didn't get in, but just that process, flying into Austin and interviewing with the team there, kind of gave us enough confidence that this is something that we should pursue.
Very cool.
And that was, I think, the turning point that led me to quit my job and go back to Ann Arbor and keep working on it.
Very good.
So we did that. Yeah.
Sorry, can I ask you? I hear Y Combinator all the time. I know it's a startup initiative or it's a startup project and there's funders and stuff, but what is that? Like, is it a 6-month program? Is it funded by angel investors? How does that work?
Yeah. So it's a startup accelerator.
Okay.
There's the first one was back in 2007. I think Reddit was in the first batch. They just went public. They've had some huge companies that have gone through it. Reddit, Coinbase, Stripe, Airbnb.
Oh, wow.
A lot of public companies, a lot of billion-dollar companies. And basically it's a 12-week program. They give you $125,000. It's kind of ranged over the years. I think now it's $500K. They take 7% of the company, and you fly out to Silicon Valley. First, you fly out for a 10-minute interview. So people fly in from all over the world and have a 10-minute interview.
Wow.
I had an interview with Sam Altman, and he eventually called me and hey, we want to fund you. You're in, which is really cool, especially now looking back.
Yeah.
So it's a 12-week program. You go out to San Francisco, and the idea is that for 12 weeks, you're growing 10% week over week. That culminates with a demo day. A lot of big name investors come in. Ashton Kutcher. I met Ashton Kutcher. I met Mike Shinoda from Linkin Park. Some other,
cool.
Big name investors you read about on TechCrunch and Twitter. And yes, the idea is that you're surrounded by these amazing, ambitious companies. The partners have all done big things. Mostly you're just working at home. And then Tuesday nights, they have these famous dinners where they bring in big names and they give you a speech, and kind of famous for being off the record, so they can kind of tell you the stories that you wouldn't hear in the media, like the real dirt of the stories. Exactly. And then at the end, you pitch and you raise money.
Wow, it must be super intense, right? If they're bringing in everyone in, you've got 12 weeks to either make it or not make it, right?
It is. And you have group office hours with, say, 7 or 8 other companies every 2 weeks. It's the same companies that are coming in, the same people in your group. Like we had a GitLab in our group back when they were 10 people. Now they're a public company with, worth billions of dollars.
Wow, so you're really playing with the big boys.
Oh yeah. Wait, at that point, they're not the big boys.
Right.
But now they're the big boys. But back then they're just companies that are going through the same challenges that you're going through. And you kind of realize that all startups are kind of, kind of a mess.
They're messy.
Yeah. Behind the scenes, and everyone starts off with very modest beginning. They all go through the same problems, whether you're GitLab building products for developers, or there was like an equipment rental marketplace. There was a hardware product for automatically detecting groceries at a supermarket chain.
Right.
They all have the same products. They're all figuring things out as they go. Yeah.
Wow. So what are you doing in those like office hours? Is there like people making speeches, or are y'all just working together in the shared space and throwing ideas around? Or
so you kind of go around. You go around in the circle, and you have to talk about your metrics.
Okay.
And they really emphasize you need to know your metrics. They want to see really that you're focusing on really one metric and improving that week over week.
So it's like an agile sprint kind of
somewhat, yeah.
process where what's the key metric? What are you trying to get to by the end of the week or whatever it is? So what metric did you pick? You got to tell us.
So back then it was CribSpot. So we had to launch in a bunch of universities. At first, when we went into Y Combinator, I think we were at 15 universities.
Okay.
We talked to our group partner, was like, you need to be at all of the universities. So from the beginning of the program to the end, our goal was to launch at 170 universities, we had to launch in 20 universities per week. And that meant scraping hundreds of thousands of listings, emailing hundreds of thousands of students. And so part of our metric was launching schools, but also obviously we need to get users. And so I think for us at that point, it was probably just active users. How many people are using the platform?
All those marketplaces are chicken and egg scenarios, right? You have to have one before the other. But I guess you have to get the schools in this case first. Or else users.
So it is a chicken and egg problem. The way we got around that was by, you can kind of hack supply by scraping it, even without the landlord's knowledge or permission. And then all you have to focus on is getting the students, but it's immediately useful for the students because we have that supply.
Right.
And then the idea being, once we have the demand, all those students are emailing the landlords. The landlords see that, hey, like this website is giving me leads. I need to go in and update my listings so that they're accurate. And then that's how we get the landlords to come onto the platform because there's demand. They feel like they need to keep them up to date.
So they're going to be more reactive in that case. But if the lead is there, it's going to be worth it. And so how did that go then, getting all those universities and getting all those users signed up and then pitching at the end?
Yeah, I mean, it went well. I think definitely during Y Combinator, we grew a lot. We had ways to hack supply, like I said. We had ways to hack demand. We were really good at scraping university email databases.
Yeah.
And those are, surprisingly, it's public and they think that they can hide it. But, my co-founder was really good at getting past their little tricks.
Right.
And so every week we were emailing hundreds of thousands of students.
Wow.
We got a real surge at first after we launched at a school. And so after those 12 weeks, we could say, we've launched at all these schools. We have this many hundreds of thousands of, users. And that went well. We pitched at demo day and we raised some money.
That's where you raised.
So at first we raised $660K in Ann Arbor in 2014.
Okay.
Before Y Combinator.
Okay.
And that was from a local VC and some other angel investors, some small funds. And then in Y Combinator, after Y Combinator, I forget exactly how much, we raised some more money after Y Combinator as well. You can kind of raise on the name.
Okay.
You instantly have a lot of legitimacy just being backed by Y Combinator.
Okay, so it's a really good brand to have at your name. So when you raise that money, do you take on other developers or do you kind of, it's your own living expenses or?
So we started right after university. And so we kind of transitioned, kind of just kept going at like the college way of life. We all lived together. We spent very little money. We paid ourselves very little money, like the minimum that we could survive on. So I don't remember the exact timeline, but we did bring on developers. One guy was a personal friend from Michigan. He was working at Microsoft. We brought him on board, convinced him to join. Again, with the Y Combinator name, that does a lot for not only convincing investors, but also potential employees.
Right.
And so he joined just before Y Combinator. He lived with us. We had a house in Mountain View for 4 months. It was sort of like the headquarters and the office. We had the tables in the living room and the dining room and working from there and sort of the classic Silicon Valley setup. So we hired him. We hired some more people over time. I think the biggest our company was maybe 13, 14 people.
Okay, very good, very good. Wow, yeah, so very classic Silicon Valley.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly.
Well, it sounds super exciting.
It was really exciting. Definitely one of the best experiences of my professional life was going through YC.
What do you think was the biggest learning from it? Was it like pitching to the investors or just how to focus on those metrics and make that your one and only focus? Or was it getting the team together and putting a good product?
I think focus is a big part of it. Right. Focusing on a single metric and just trying to grow that week over week. Like that is how a startup becomes successful. Right. When I'm talking to other startup founders, it's always, I need to do this, I need to do that. We need to do, like all these different things. And the idea is, how do you simplify your business down to just a single metric? Yeah. And that can relate to growth, but also just that kind of focus and how you can think about a business really simply, I think applies in a wide range of things. So focus is one thing. A lot of it is sort of just by osmosis, honestly, just being in these group office hours. Like, even though I wasn't doing B2B sales at the time, I can see other companies like GitLab or others in the batch doing outbound sales. And our partner, Kasser, who's now leading another $1 billion company, was sort of preaching like, okay, like you need to email everyone. Everyone is going through the same problems, and you learn just by being in the room with them. And as a startup founder, you really need to be good at a lot of different things, a generalist. And I think by going through that, I learned a little bit, just enough to get dirty, with a lot of different things.
It really shows you the power of like that osmosis of just surrounding yourself with the right types of people.
Exactly.
And then all the things you pick up just by overhearing that sales conversation, or by learning what apps they're using, or by seeing how they're taking on people, or what metrics they're focusing on. Amazing. So can I ask, so when did you decide to move on from that? Like, what was the moving on stage? Did you try to get someone else to take it over? Were you trying to sell it? Were you trying to, what was?
So there's a big sort of few year gap before we shut it down from Y Combinator. So we weren't really making money. We had all these ideas about how to reinvent the rental experience with online tours and online payments and, online lease signing and rent payments through a mobile app, and chatting with your landlord through a mobile app and seeing the status of maintenance requests. It was really old school. So we had all these great ideas, but we really needed landlord adoption to do it, and they just didn't care. And so we were kind of realized, or had this hypothesis, that the best way to do that would actually be to manage the properties ourselves. If we had control over the properties, we could have full control to do all those things and really reinvent the process as we saw fit. And so it was hard to convince landlords to let these, college kids manage their properties.
Yeah.
But we knew that people were undercharging, and we could easily make up our fees if we just helped them to get market rates. And so rather than just, trying to promise it, we guaranteed it. And we would sign a lease at the price that they wanted to have, and then we would sublet it for more. And oftentimes we would rent by the bedroom and furnish the places and have this great communal experience.
It's quite a bold move. You take on all these leases.
It was a bold move. And you need to take bold moves, I think, to be successful. And so at first we did this, and we had some traction. We were making some money. And we had an office hours with Paul Graham, who's the founder of Y Combinator, sort of like a legend in the startup world. We told him this, and he was super excited about it. He was the one also that told the Airbnb founders, hey, go to where your users are, go to New York, start taking pictures, and really about doing things that don't scale. Right. And so following that conversation, we're convinced also we're going to go down this path of managing properties. Most of managing a property happens online. You can automate most of it, from rent payments to dispatching maintenance workers. So we went and we vertically integrated, where we had apps for maintenance technicians, for renters, for the property owners, for everything.
You built all these apps?
We built all of it just with our small team. And again, that goes back to focus. That was a mistake. Okay. Don't try and innovate on everything. But we did that. We probably got to 900 tenants across 300-400 different properties across a few different cities. But it was really hard to scale, both from a growth perspective. There's no natural network effects going from Ann Arbor to East Lansing. Landlords don't all sort of sit in the same place. There's no natural place where they congregate, offline or online. Operationally, it turns out it's a lot more difficult to scale the management of properties. Every property is different. Every owner's different.
Yeah, but just to take you back to that point about doing things, like the advice you got, doing things that don't scale, and then it's also hard to scale. How do you reconcile those?
So you need to do things that won't obviously scale. Don't worry about how this thing is going to scale before you even start. Worry until it's a problem, and then solve the problem when you get there.
So it's about building a good platform that people buy into, and then after that you can figure out the scaling problem.
Exactly.
Right. Okay.
Once it's the real thing that people want, and once you are actually facing this problem, then you solve it. Startups are really about, there's always problems to solve. There's always a million fires burning.
Yes.
You have to pick which fires are worth solving. You solve those, then you figure out what's the next biggest fire to solve, what's the next biggest problem, and that just happens until forever.
It sounds like you guys made tons of progress. Like you did really well.
Yeah, we were really good at detecting a problem or detecting opportunity and sprinting really quickly towards it. So we did that. Eventually it became really hard to scale, really hard business. Kind of ran out of money to a certain extent, or we were almost running out of money, and decided at that point it was time to shut down. We looked for a company to acquire us, talked to dozens of different companies. Didn't really find someone to, technically acquire us. We did find a company, Apartment List, in San Francisco that absorbed the team. So my co-founder and I both joined Apartment List. He was an engineering manager. I was a product manager. Sort of just seemed like a logical fit based on what we were doing.
Yeah, it was a smooth transition. But
exactly.
What did it feel like going from being the innovators and the head of your own organization to working for someone else, was it a happy relief because you had some of the responsibility off your shoulders, or was it difficult to start working with other?
I think all of the above.
Yes,
I think it was nice to have a real paycheck and be able to sign off, and the problems, they're not your problems.
Yeah.
Which eventually kind of becomes less motivating because problems are bad, but working for yourself, you kind of get the good and the bad. It's working for other company. I feel like it was it's a lot of sort of just even keel, little ups, little downs. Working for yourself, it's the dopamine rush of the highs, the stress of the lows, and that part's exciting for me. So to answer your question, it's nice to have a paycheck and some stability and focus more on the things outside of work, but eventually you kind of get stuck in and less motivated by not really bureaucracy. It was a relatively small company, but just the big company stuff. It's not you making the decisions. There's a lot of politics and working with different people and convincing people and
systems and structures and processes that are already there. And you've less kind of agency or authority to impact those when you come in, right? From somewhere else.
Yeah.
So your role in that was product manager, or you were engineering there as well?
No, I was a product manager. So I had an engineering background, but at my company, I kind of went from engineering to growth, marketing, sales, a little bit of everything. And so I could have gone and been an engineer at Apartmentless, but I thought the logical thing and the thing that I wanted to do was have a bigger business impact. And so I was a product manager.
Yeah. So you enjoyed more working with the business and the product and the people. It's actually a job that a lot of people don't know exists, right? They're like, I like the tech stuff, but I don't want to be working with tech all day. I like working with people. And I'm like, do you know about product managers?
Yeah.
And they're like, what's that?
It is a thing. It's not like a logical, you don't go to college to be a product manager.
Right.
A lot of people want to go into product management, but they don't know how do you get into it? Can I go from being an engineer or, doing marketing or sales? Like, how do I get into being a product manager? People don't like to hire product managers who haven't been a product manager. So sometimes people go from being like doing something else to getting an MBA and going from an MBA into product management. But I just kind of stumbled into it based on my experience.
You did it first, right? You managed the product.
Yeah, indirect. I mean, my title wasn't product manager, but essentially I did.
Yeah,
exactly.
Right. You're working on the features, the functionality, the bugs, all that sort of stuff, and then lining it with business objectives, right?
Exactly. Yeah.
Do you think that's a good synopsis of a product manager, or do you have a better way of describing? Because people might listen to this and think, I've never heard of product manager at all.
Okay.
They think of a product being like a microphone or a chair or something like that, not a piece of tech.
So product manager, you have to be an expert on your users, their problems. You need to be an expert on the business, what matters to the business. And you need to figure out a way to solve their problems in a way that also achieves your business objectives. Sort of finding the middle ground of what the business cares about, what the users care about, and aligning a product vision that helps you to sort of check both boxes.
So if you think like business, users, or even just business people, like in the internal team and the external team, and then the product, would you say it's kind of a 30%, 30% type of thing? Or how would you break it down? Do you think, no, most of the time I'm 50% or 60% on product, or I'm mostly talking to people? How do you break it down?
So operationally, you work with a lot of different people. Yeah. So you'll work obviously with engineers, like a lower level, entry level product manager, even like a senior level product manager. We're still with a team of engineers, probably an analyst who's doing the number crunching, a designer, depending on what the product you're building is. That was my team. So you're coordinating the bi-weekly sprints, figuring out what people are going to be working on, figuring out the long-term strategy and how you break that down into shorter-term milestones. Right. As part of that, you're not just, so with Apartmentless, I also had to coordinate with the sales teams. Nice. They're ultimately going to have to be pitching these products in one way, shape, or form, and making sure that they're aligned, getting insights from them. You're working with them. You're working with, say, like the growth team and the COO, kind of bubbling it back up. Right. A big part of product management is making sure that the right people know the right information at the right time. So communication is a really important thing. So to answer your question, you might be working with a lot of different roles. It's really going to vary depending on the company. Right. I think a product manager is it's going to look different at every company, honestly.
Yeah, but it's good to have a good general overview of different areas of the company so you can speak their language.
Exactly.
In a way. So I suppose if the breakdown was technical, like understanding the product, understanding the code, understanding the features and functionality versus working with people, then working on the business stuff. Do you think, like, if you're thinking of a ratio, like if someone's trying to get an idea, I go into this job, am I mostly having meetings and conversations with people? Or is my day broken up by like mornings are like meetings with people, afternoon is like working on product and technical stuff with the IT guys? Or like what?
Unfortunately, you're probably going to have a lot of meetings as a product manager. So in terms of how like the day might break down, you're working a lot with engineers, a lot on, say we're going to be building out the roadmap for the next 10 weeks.
Yeah.
I need to get enough clarity from maybe other people in the organization to flesh out what those are going to look like. So like the me time where I'm not in meetings is going to be designing with my designer, say for another thing that we're going to be working on in a few weeks. I might be meeting with my analyst. We probably run experiments where you launch a feature, a thing, see how it's working. So I'll be talking with my analyst about how things are going, try and pull insights from that data, put that together in a way that I can pitch to other people. I'm not working directly with engineers. Like I want to leave them to work without being in meetings. Ideally, the fewer meetings that my technical team is in, the more productive we're going to be. So more I'll be working on asynchronous resources and maybe specs that they'll ingest at a later point, but not necessarily working hand in hand with them all day. We'll have a morning a morning stand up. I might have meetings related to a specific feature or something that we're going to be deploying or working on a few weeks later. It's important to involve the engineers early on in the process versus just bringing on this feature that is way too complex. They don't like that. They want to be involved. I'm not sure if I'm exactly answering your question. It's hard to...
Yeah, it's different.
And the ratio is going to be different depending on every company.
Yeah. No, I think you have answered it by saying like, there's meetings you have to be in, and then sometimes you have to talk about the technical things. So,
but one thing to emphasize there when you're talking about technical things, I think some people fall into a trap where they think you have to be technical. You have to have a technical background to be a product manager. And really that's not true. I think it really helps. You get more respect, I think, from engineers when you do speak their language and you don't give them things that are overly complex, but it's not a necessity by any stretch.
Right. Well, one of the things I find people get really stuck on that you alluded to is that it's like getting in there. Like, how do I get into it? It's like you look at the requirements, it's like must have 5 years experience as a product manager. And like, there's no, more and more there's like junior product manager, there's product owner, or there's like stuff like that. But like, it's not a very clear route in. And sometimes I would say, well, maybe if we break down some of the elements of it, like if you look at user experience, user interface design, or you look at project management, you can kind of piece together the skills one by one in different, but like that would be, so I'd be breaking in the job in different ways and piecing it together and say, like, let's acquire these skills, get some knowledge, and then you can make that as a pitch. But if you're giving someone advice about getting into product management, like, is it that side hustle that you said, look, build your own project on the side and then that will demonstrate it? Or what would you say is the best way to go about it?
So certain backgrounds I think would lend themselves more easily to going into product management. One would be design. You're already talking to users. You're working with the product very directly. You're setting a product vision more on the design side, user experience side, but that would be a more easier transition. Engineers, trying to be more involved. So I want to be a product manager. I'm an engineer. Try to be more involved in we're working on this feature. Get more involved, maybe in customer interviews, working hand in hand with the designer, product manager. If you voice that to your team, generally speaking, they'll be willing to work with you and try and get you more involved. That's a good thing. So putting your vision out into the world, telling people, hey, I want to be a product manager moving forward. Here's maybe I can give you focus on this. We can give you a plan. We can try and involve you in more of the things that would make you a good product manager.
Right. So you kind of work up to it, right? You take on more responsibilities.
Yeah.
Let's say if you're doing UX or UI, you start taking on those responsibilities and move yourself up.
And I think a good manager, if you tell them, this is my goal, if you're in a good, healthy company with a healthy culture, they'll help you achieve that. They want to keep you within the company. They're not going to fire you because you want to be a product manager within the same company. I saw that at Apartment List too, specifically 2 people who went from other roles, one in, I think like data operations, one in marketing or something. And they went into being a product manager. I think it's like I said, you tell people, this is what I want to do. And in a good, healthy organization with a good manager, they're going to help you understand, here's what you need to do to get into an entry level product manager role.
To get there. Yeah. Yeah. Good advice. I like it. Top tips, Tim.
Top tips, Tim. That's
right,
my new nickname.
That'll be your new nickname.
Yeah.
Sometimes I read online on LinkedIn or on Twitter tips about product management, and I find that more than any other profession I've seen, it's got lots of philosophy behind it. Do you find like your daily stand-up should only be maximum 10 minutes, and the less meetings you have a day, the better. There's lots of you don't see that about a tax professional. They don't have all these philosophies underpinning what they do.
Yeah.
You don't really have it with a graphic designer. A little bit, but not as much. Do you find that as well?
Yeah, there's a lot of content out there. I don't know. Maybe it's because there can be a reputation for product managers. They like to, talk and spew BS and that actually do work, but just sort of delegate. And I don't know if it kind of feeds into that idea of like wanting to be an influencer.
Okay.
Maybe it's because, like you're saying, there's a lot of people that want to go into product management, so that content gets clicks.
Or maybe having good sales skills. Maybe you have to be good at selling yourself or selling your projects to a certain extent.
And then when you want to go to a new job, you can point to all this stuff I've written.
Right.
And maybe that gives you some street cred for whatever you want to do next.
Yeah, fair enough. Speaking of what you want to do next, so from Apartment List, you moved on again, is that right?
Yes, I moved on. So again, I don't feel like I'm ever really happy working for someone else. So I kind of always got like fidgety and kind of ready to move on after maybe a year and a half.
What is that?
Why is that?
Yeah.
I think it's the reasons I talked about before. Even at a company where I'm getting paid well with a good culture, free lunches and stocked fridges, and I like the people I was working with. I think it's like I said before, I like to have, the ups and downs of doing my own thing.
So more motivating, more exciting.
Yeah, more motivating, more exciting. When I'm working on something that's for myself versus someone else, it can be the same task, and I'm just more invested when it's for myself. I think it's freedom. And that's the thing I think is my North Star now. It's freedom to work on whatever I want, like what I want, when I want, where I want. I'm in Portugal. I was working from all over the world for 2.5 years. So I think maybe it's
it's in your blood, I think.
It is in my blood. I think so. Yeah.
Yeah, I think there's some people who go into startups, and there's other people, and they can make it work because they've got a very good idea and they can execute it. And there's other people where that's just who they are. I think it's just really deeply ingrained in them. Exactly. Even if they fail 10 times, they're going to start an 11th time because that's just what they do. It's part of who they are. I've always felt self-employment was part of
you're doing the same thing, right?
My identity. So it's and the ups and downs that go with that, or the struggles that go with that. They're challenges I own as well. So can you tell us about your current role?
Sure. Okay. So now I'm working for it's called ESW Capital. It's sort of like a private equity firm, or really like a large family office. They own about 100 different B2B software companies. So they acquire them, they operate them, they don't sell them. They've been around 20, 25 years. And the companies range from products for telcos, so think like Vodafone, Verizon, AT&T, so for telcos, to CRMs, to products for sales teams and marketing teams, customer help desk type customer support software, all over the place. Just B2B software is what they focus on.
So their business is buying and selling
software. They don't sell, only buy and operate them.
They buy, operate them, and then they're taking the profits.
Exactly.
Are they putting new teams in?
So to a large extent, yes. They have what they call centralized teams. So they don't have a customer support team, for example, for every different company. They want to standardize operations across the portfolio, and I think that's a very common strategy. So they have existing teams. If they acquire a new company, they're going to have their existing teams also contributing to whatever that new company is doing and applying. They have standardized processes. Unsurprisingly, they're not going to reinvent the wheel for every single company. So I think that answers your question. Yeah.
So what's your role?
So my role is in product, more or less. It's very different from a traditional product management role. My team is involved from before we even place a bid on a company, all the way to post-acquisition and plenty of things there. So the first thing that we would do is, hey, I want to acquire this company. I'm potentially thinking about putting a bid on this company. I'll go and analyze the product from a business, like a product perspective. So we get some anonymized data, nothing, amazing in terms of data that they give us. They're not going to tell us specific customer names, for example. Right. And then I get an hour interview typically with the executive team, maybe the head of product. And I get to dig in where what we want to really understand is how sticky is this product? Like when we buy this company, are customers going to churn? Are they going to stick with us for a decade or more? If we increase the prices, are they going to suddenly churn? Yeah. How durable is the revenue that they are currently, getting today?
Right.
And so I have to kind of put in analysis there, and that is one input of many to whether or not they're going to be placing a bid on the company.
Okay.
And then after, so say that they accept the bid, there's a letter of intent that gets signed. That basically means that we want to acquire you. You want to be acquired by us. Now we need to go into a due diligence phase. So we need to review everything, all your contracts, everything to make sure that this is legit. Everything that you told us is true. And then after that, the deal closes. And so I'm also involved a little bit in that due diligence phase. Okay. But the most I think of what I do is after acquisition. So they have a standardized way of doing things. They have margin targets for the business, sort of how profitable these businesses need to be. And so my job is after an acquisition, how do we simplify the product, simplify pricing, maybe increase prices if we have to in order to hit these margin targets, and then set a product vision to a certain extent. Largely, we're focusing on how do we use generative AI, as I think are a lot of businesses, especially when we're sort of refreshing old products in the portfolio. So my team will go in and work on a lot of that stuff also post-acquisition.
Wow. So you're managing loads of products now.
Exactly. It's very different. I probably worked on 20, 25 different products across my year and a half there.
Wow.
So you're not going as deep as I was when I was managing a few products at
but that's got to be a learning at a whole other level, right?
It is. And I think my experience at YC really helps me to, in this role, a little bit. An important thing is being able to, especially during these hour-long calls, really understand what are the most important parts of a business and the most important parts of a product. It has like a million features. What is the meat of this product? What really matters? What drives business value? And so if I'm working across 20, 25 different companies, I need to be able to quickly go into a company, understand what matters, look at the data and figure out what do I need to focus on, and be able to context switch quickly between 1 to 5 different products.
Well, you got to tell us, what have you learned, right? You must have some rules of thumb, like if I see this, or if I see this, if I see this.
So one thing that I've learned is every product can be thought of in a very similar way. Like there's similar metaphors that you can look at that can apply to, like I said, a product in telco to marketing software, HR software. And it kind of looks like, so imagining the software, the product is sort of a black box. There are inputs that go into it. Think things that people enter into the software, maybe an integration that pulls data from something else and puts it into the software. There are outputs. Maybe that's like a blog that it's like a website that gets published, or like a social media post that gets drafted from it. It could be, calculation or like an important decision. Like how should you price it? Whatever that output is, it's some sort of output. It's why they buy the software. There's some sort of output. And then in the middle, there's all these knobs and dials that help you transform those inputs into those outputs. And there's optimal ways of configuring those features in a way that produces more value or less value. And pretty much every product can be thought of that way. And when I'm talking to a new company or analyzing a new product, I really try and understand within the context of that metaphor and this product, what matters. There's all these things, what matters, and it's going to be, what are the outputs, and why is this hard also? Is this like the way that you kind of figure out how to produce those outputs, make those decisions? What's hard about this? And that also kind of goes into the stickiness. If it's super easy, that means it's
right. So the hardness is about stickiness. So if the problem you're solving is difficult, it's more sticky.
To a certain extent, but there's other aspects I think that maybe are even more important when it comes to stickiness. One might be data lock-in. So there's all this data in the product that is really important for your business and also can't be exported or can't be exported easily or cheaply. And so if I churn from this product, I'm going to lose all this really important data that is valuable for insights that I really need. And so churning is going to sacrifice that data that's really important. That's sticky. It's going to make it hard for me to switch. Or like 100% of this team, like my sales team, my marketing team, uses this product every single day. If I were to churn, I'm going to have to retrain this entire organization on a new piece of software. There's a ton of stuff that can go wrong there. It's really expensive to retrain everybody, a lot of risk. So that would also make that product more sticky.
Right.
Maybe it helps. Yeah.
So data is sticky. Let's say time to train people.
Use or usage. Yeah, like how heavily the product is being used today.
On the time. And then the amount of data that's in there is sticky as well. So any of those things that make it difficult to leave the product.
It might not be the amount of data, but necessarily the challenge of exporting it. There can be a lot of data in there, but if it's really easy to pull out, then it's not as sticky.
Right. Ah, that's fascinating, isn't it?
Yeah.
When you're looking at those businesses, are you forecasting, like, let's say it's a business to business. So, we're going to charge people, we're going to charge this business 10 grand to use our CRM software, 10 grand a month. Are you forecasting if we increase this to 11 grand, then how much do the users drop off? Or if we reduce it to 9, how much do they increase? Are you guys doing
as a company? Like we are. Me personally, I'm not.
Okay.
I can see those models, but they project out. Yeah. Okay. So hypothetically, maybe we'll change the prices here. This is what we expect for revenue to be in years 2, 3, 4, 5, and beyond. This is when we expect us to. Here's the payback period.
Right.
Here's the projected returns, and they've been doing this for a long time, so they're pretty good at estimating these things. They're fairly accurate, I think.
Yeah. It's amazing, right? Because when you're starting off in a business, it seems like this almost artistic venture that we're gonna try this idea, because an idea is kind of artistic. It's kind of, it's maybe a passion project, but then at this level, it's so analytical, it's so formulaic that it's kind of just a different
And when
perspective.
we were doing like our own startups, we had to put together models and projections when we were raising money, and it's all BS. I mean, it's numbers on a spreadsheet, but you have no idea.
Right.
Everyone does it, but nobody has any idea. It's all, it's never right.
Yeah. It's just trying to not be too wrong. Is the secret.
Yeah.
I would love to know, I feel this is a juicy question. I would love to know when you're asking these guys in these interviews that you have an hour long with, is it like the CEO or the CTO that you're talking to? What are you asking them and what are you trying to really figure out, right? Because obviously they're pitching.
Exactly.
So, and you've been on the other side of the pitch. You've been the pitcher.
Yeah.
Or you've been the pitchee, right? And now you're receiving, you're catching.
Yeah.
So what are you looking for?
At first, I want to understand the product. Like I was saying, what makes the product, is the solution it's built, is the problem it's solving? Is that it is a difficult problem to solve? Is their solution
But wait,
unique?
you've done that before, right? Because they've sent you their documentation, they've sent you the business plan, you've seen it, maybe you've seen it live now. So at that point you're talking to them and you've probably done a lot of research already,
Yeah,
right?
exactly. Yeah. So I might say, so they probably said that they have this solution, maybe it has a sexy name, it does this magic, and you just dig in. Like, so why is that challenging? What does it specifically do? What does this dive into specifics. And maybe that's part of what I need to do. I have a template of like, here's the categories I want to go into, but really a good interview is off the cuff. You really have to dig into things. They say something surface level and you dig into the specifics until it becomes obvious. Like they're going to pitch it in the best way possible.
Yeah.
My job is to dig in, and
you must have a good BS detector as well, because they're trying to sell a company to you in
and
an
that
hour.
comes from doing from doing it more and more times. You kind of learn to detect the BS.
Yeah. Wow. Okay. Any telltale signs?
Not at a high level. I'm trying to think. I wouldn't say telltale signs of BS. It's more, they're going to pitch it however you want. It's more of if you understand. I'm trying to think. It's a hard question.
Yeah. I guess you're going on intuition a lot of the time, and you're seeing, does it match up with other case studies you have in your head or other models that you've seen work successfully? Or if you know the industry is struggling and they're telling you it's not struggling, maybe you're identifying those trends or you're correlating with other information, that sort of thing. Or
another way to do it is they'll describe the product at a very high level. And a product can do a lot of things, but the ways each customer actually uses the product is going to be different. Each customer might use the product in a little bit different way. So they say, here's all the product can do. And I'll say, in the context of your top 3 customers, let's say pick one. What do they specifically use the product for? How do they specifically use X, Y, and Z? And that's a good way to get through the BS detector. Anybody can describe the product within the context of everything it can do and all the potential value. But I want to understand, how do specific customers do this?
Yeah.
And you might have to break the customers out into different cohorts. So some customers might use the product for X. Other customers might use the product primarily for Y. And it's okay. So in each of these contexts, pick one specific customer. What specifically do they do? How do they specifically use this feature? You said that like this thing is really valuable. It's really difficult to do. Why is that valuable specifically for that customer?
Yeah. It's interesting because that's the exact same thing we do when we're interviewing people for jobs. We ask them for
exactly
competency-based questions where give us an example of doing X, Y, Z. And when they go through the example, you're using your BS detector to say, well, is that a real example? Or, and does that make logical sense? Or are you just telling me a lovely story?
Or say, differentiate from what we did as a team or as an organization from what you specifically did.
Right. Surely a good business doesn't want to sell. That's why they're a good business, right?
And yes, that's a good point. So leading into why do companies sell?
So would you be asking them, why do you want to sell to us if you're doing so well? Why are you trying to sell?
As an organization, I'm sure they ask those questions, but there are a lot of different interviews for
so you're doing
different
the product
purposes,
interview.
or not a lot, but a few. There is other people's, maybe the CEOs of individual business units that are going into some of those details. Ultimately, that probably comes across before we even get to these, to the interview stage. It's often the case that these are VC-backed companies. For the VCs to be successful, once you've taken a bunch of VC money, kind of need to be like a 7-figure exit, like a 10-figure, like $1 billion company, or it's not a good outcome. Right. And so they raise all this money, they go really fast, and they're not hitting those, they're not growing at the level that they need to be growing to be a successful VC-backed company. Maybe they've run out of money. Maybe they've just stopped growing. And at that point, you just sort of, you're done. It's not working. And even if they're making $10, $20 million in revenue, they're not going to have that huge outcome. And so they're going to sell.
Right.
Other times, you don't really necessarily know in all cases. I would say a lot of it is financial difficulties in one way, shape, or form.
Okay. But they could still have a fantastic product. They could just not have the finances to keep investing in, especially if competition is tough, right? So that's a
theoretically great business, but they're not operating it well.
Yeah. And then that's when you get in the experts to really operate well. I could also imagine why people might not want to have the responsibility or the stress of trying to run a high growth business like that. Is there any mistakes that you see people doing where you're just like, that's a common one, you fell into that one, whether it be they just don't have, let's say they don't have their product documentation in order, or they're not keeping up with AI or the latest trends in the industry?
Within the context of this job, I feel like it would be more in, I don't know if it's lack of focus, overinvestment in like total addressable market. This is just sort of the VC world where we need to operate at a loss, invest in all of these engineers, high paid engineers to build the next big thing. In order to go from a $20 million business into a $100 million business, we need to expand into this new vertical, this new product. That's very expensive. It's not a mistake necessarily. It just, that's the VC path. Go into.
Sorry, I hear this lack of focus all the time, like everywhere. And I think that makes, as soon as you said it, I was like, that makes total sense. I was speaking to someone recently and they were like, instead of expanding to like 20 different countries and trying to get our product all over those, we could have just gone deeper in one country.
Exactly.
In my case as well, right? Trying to do lots of different social media platforms instead of just picking a couple and doing them really, really well and connecting with audiences there. But that seems to be, I don't like to quote Steve Jobs, so I'm going to quote Steve Jobs.
Yeah, go for it. Plenty of people have.
It's terrible, right? It's such a cliche thing.
You got to get the clicks running. I get it.
But it's that's where they say it's what we didn't do. It's the things that they avoided really were super important as well.
There's always this shiny objects out there to chase. And when you're in the moment, the thing that you're doing you know about all the challenges, all the problems, all the reasons why it could go wrong. You probably experienced a lot of those problems. And whatever this shiny new object is always seems easier and seems like it has more potential. And that's just because you haven't analyzed it enough. You haven't faced the problems that are surely going to be down that path. So focus is ignoring those shiny objects.
Yep, absolutely. Speaking of ignoring things, we're going to ignore that person at the door.
Okay.
So you're an innovative self-starter. You love startups. You're working in VC and acquisitions now. Do you ever think there's a potential of you kicking off your own gig or maybe doing some consulting and getting into this area? Because you work on product. Now you've worked with VC, so you've worked on both sides of the table. Well, you could marry those.
Yeah. Honestly, I do think of, I think an ideal next path would be acquiring my own small software business. And I think my eyes have opened up to that over the past 6 to 12 months in a few different ways. So I've kind of alluded to a few times my past vision of software companies. You start a software company, you raise money, and you become either a $1 billion company or nothing. With my role now, I can kind of see that there's another path, and you can become a highly profitable software company where you operate at high margins, and the goal is not to become, grow at all costs and become that $1 billion outcome. There's a high probability for a very good outcome rather than saying a very, very low probability of an incredible $1 billion outcome. And I think that path is more attractive to me now. I've kind of seen like starting a new company from scratch it's a real slog. It's real difficult. It's a grind, especially with my last company. You see that for the first year, you might not really see it. You're searching for product market fit. It's challenging. Versus acquiring company, there's this whole field of entrepreneurship through acquisition. You can find books on it. There's plenty of podcasts on it. I've been immersing myself in that world. And with that, you can immediately jump into a business that has a track record, has revenue coming in. You pay yourself a salary right away. Maybe it has product market fit. It's an easier path.
It's kind of like, is it like a mortgage in a way that you would buy this business and you would just invest in it and then try to get a salary and grow it over time?
It's very similar to that. And I think if I were to tell people I'm going to go buy a software company, the first reaction, and probably me in the past too, is you must have millions of dollars to go put on this, buying a business. But it more is like you're saying, imagine you're buying a apartment building. And if you tell me you're buying an apartment building, I wouldn't assume that you have tens of millions of dollars. Yeah. I assume that you're putting down some amount. You have a good amount of money. You're raising money. You're going to a bank, getting a loan perhaps. And it's the same thing when it comes to buying a software company. The risk is higher. The returns are greater, but it's similar in that context.
Yeah, right. So you've got some capital, but it is more, it is just a normal measured thing. You're not like a superstar investor. And actually you're well placed. You're well placed because you've worked on both sides of the table, right?
Yeah.
So you understand that business quite well. It's a whole new concept for me, right? You don't really hear about people doing these acquisitions. How do you go about that? Are you hunting online, or would you hunt online?
Yeah.
Or is there a website that lists all these?
There are websites.
Oh, really?
So in this area, the more typical path is like a non-sexy business, like a laundromat.
I was going to say, I bet lots of people
company.
Want the sexy businesses, right? They want the fancy stuff, but not.
But that is the more common path. In the US, there are SBA loans, small business administration loans, that not easy, but it's fairly easy to get a 90% loan on the cost of business. So if it costs like $1 million, you'll put down $100K and get $900K from the SBA. It's a personal guarantee. Right. And there's a lot of, boomers that are retiring and want to get rid of those unsexy businesses that they started 30 years ago. So that's more common. There are websites for those type of businesses, for software businesses. One is like acquire.com. There is BizBuySell, Flippa. Each of them sort of has different kinds of websites, different levels of quality, vetting. Or you can go through brokers. That's very common. So if I'm trying to sell my business, I'll go to a broker. If I'm trying to buy a business, I'll talk to a broker about, here's the business I'm looking to buy. Imagine a real estate agent, but for a business. So those exist as well.
Why would you buy one when you could buy 5 smaller ones and spread your risk that way? Or are you spreading your focus like we spoke about?
It's actually the opposite when it comes to risk. a very small business with making less revenue, there's more that can go wrong. There might be a shorter track record. So shorter proven history that this is going to last. Like one small event could wipe it out. If it's less profitable, there's less room for error.
Less revenue to fix problems.
Less you can invest in growth and less margin. Whereas a bigger company with a longer track record is actually less risky for the opposite of all those reasons.
Right. Yeah, very interesting. Yeah, I never thought about it like that. Yeah, so it's more robust because maybe it's been around longer. It's bigger, so it can handle smaller expenses, like if there's a legal issue or whatever.
Exactly.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow, fantastic. So very exciting.
It is exciting. I haven't really gotten into... I've thought about it a lot. I'm immersing myself in that world with the information, just ingesting a lot of information. Haven't really gotten into the weeds of really analyzing deals quite yet. That'll be, I think, the next step. Right now, I'm haven't quite gotten into that part of it yet, but I think that will be the next thing that I want to do. And I keep putting it out in the world. I think that also helps me. The more I tell people, the more I feel like I'm going to have to deliver on it.
I feel like someone's going to contact you after they hear
exactly
you on this. Well, I think a follow up in 1 year to see how you're getting on with this would be super interesting.
Let's
to
do
see
it.
the before and after. So fascinating to hear all your insights and your stories about the startup world, going to Y Combinator, working with Apartment List, and then getting into acquisitions. You've been a busy guy. You've been working hard, and you got some exciting steps coming up. So it's going to be fascinating to see where you go with this. I've got one final question.
You too. I'm excited to see this podcast where you go with all this. Your media empire.
Yeah, let's see where we go. So I'm just wondering if you were talking to 18-year-old Tim, and he's trying to figure out the world of work, trying to know what's going on with startups, with careers. How am I going to find some happiness, fulfillment, and satisfaction in my work? What sort of advice would you have? One piece of advice or two pieces of advice?
Yeah, so I think back when I was deciding to quit my job, I think that would really go against certainly my parents, the normal path of, you have a high paying job, go do that, get some experience and then quit. I think what I did, quitting that job, in hindsight was actually a good idea. I think learning, diving right into it is the best way to learn. If you think you're going to be an entrepreneur, diving into it, I think is a great way to learn. In terms of what I would do differently, I feel like I've touched on maybe a few of those. One is focus. We've talked about that. Don't do a million things when you're starting a company.
Right.
Really.
The side project as well.
Yeah, exactly. Really be focused. I think also understanding when it comes to raising money, assume that that money you're raising is the last dollars you'll ever raise. In addition to those $1 billion, public companies that I saw in my batch, I've also seen companies that are still around with small teams, presumably making millions of dollars and getting to work on exciting things without having to manage a ton of people. Right. And I think that would have been an ideal outcome for, not necessarily for our investors, but if that was us today, that would be amazing. Right. And so understanding that there are other possible outcomes other than just, higher, increase your burn, how much you're spending every month, go for that $1 billion outcome.
Right.
You don't have to go down that path. There are other ways to be successful with a tech company.
Is there any comfort you could give to somebody who wants to do these things but is terrified of leaving their salaried job?
Yeah.
Obviously, they don't want to take risks that's going to hurt themselves or anyone else close to them. But how did you think about that?
So how I thought about it would be, I got multiple job offers. You're a software engineer. I was marketable. Worst case, after 6 months, I run out of money.
So you had an exit plan.
And I get the same job or a different job and I'm making the same money and that's that. Then that worst case is really not that bad. I think a lot of people, it depends on what you're doing and your financial situation. If you have young children and a family, that equation is going to be different. You could start it in the mornings, at nights. That's the classic advice. Try and get some traction before you just quit. I think that is more conservative and the better advice. I tend to be less patient and more risk tolerant. So, but in general, I don't think the risk is as great as people might think. If you have some savings and you're marketable and you have a good job, I mean, obviously the market has been maybe a bit more challenging in the last couple of years. You'll probably be fine. It'll probably take longer than you think. If you're going to say, I'll give myself 3 months, maybe 6 months,
Totally agree.
it's not going to work. So be patient, and with your time horizon, maybe find a part-time job that can pay the bills, reduce your spending, and get something that pays the bills for 20 hours a week instead of 40 hours a week.
I think they're great. They're great tips. Have that nice long time horizon, because it's one of the things that the people burn out on, right? They just don't have enough time, and then they don't have enough time to iterate and to solve problems and to make it better and actually get that revenue or get that income that they need. And then also having an exit plan. Like, I'm going to do this for 6 months. I'm going to go hard at it. And if it doesn't work, then I know I can go back to my plan B. And even the part-time option, we're, keeping something going and testing the market and seeing, do you want to buy this? I even think getting someone to give you €1 or $1 just to get a bit of transfer of money.
And asking for people to pay is really hard to do.
Testing all those things before you actually take the leap.
One other thing that I think was really valuable for me, when I started this company, I came right out of college. And so I was used to living on very little money.
Right.
And that just continued. It's really hard to go from like a high, luxurious quality of life and scaling back. But if you can maintain that for longer, if you think you're going to be, quit in a year or two, try and limit your lifestyle creep in the big things that are harder to get out of. So an apartment, don't get a super luxury apartment. Don't get a super luxury car. There's nothing wrong with those things. But if you think you're going to be going down the entrepreneurial path and quitting that full-time income, you want to, keeping your burn low is going to give you more money when you take the leap, and it's going to extend your runway once you take that leap.
Yeah. Keep the burn low and keep the focus on point, right?
Exactly.
Super. Tim, amazing. Thanks so much for giving us a wealth of insights and tips and knowledge and background from the world of VC, startups, product management and acquisitions and all that.
Thank you for having me, Ronan. This has been a blast.
You're great. Good on you. Hi, folks. Thanks for watching this video. If you enjoyed this interview, please click the like button. And if you'd like to see more of these soon, please subscribe and support the channel. Thanks so much.